Did you know that there are more safety regulations in the United States on cattle truck than there are on ambulances that are on the road? Well, today we're here to talk about safety and innovations, and we have Dr. Nadine Levick, who, if you haven't heard yet, is a bit of an innovator. And I don't know if you've been under a rock, but she's been at every one of the EMS Leadership Summits since our first one. Every year, a cornerstone of this summit is Dr. Nadine Levick presenting on the trends and innovations in EMS and safety. And as an emergency medicine physician, a clinician, a researcher, she is definitely an innovator and founder of the Objective Safety Institute. She's conducted the first ambulance crash tests and the inaugural National Academies of Science, Medicine, Engineering, EMS Safety Subcommittee Chair, and establishing International EMS Safety Foundation as a think tank and a knowledge portal. Dr. Levick has secured over $4 million in funding in interdisciplinary research, multi-institutional research, and innovation. And her career spans 3 continents. And today she joins us live from Israel. So I'm going to bring Dr. Nadine Levick onto the stage. Nadine, welcome back.
Hi there. Well, great to be here. And I greatly value the opportunity to speak with everyone here and to share the information that I and my colleagues have worked really hard to bring together. I'm actually right now in a city called Eilat, and it's a little tip of the bottom end of Israel. And so from where I'm sitting right now, I'm right on the top of the Red Sea, where there's been a lot of interesting activity with military all over the world, actually, and shipping. And I can see Jordan, Saudi, and Egypt from my balcony. So it's pretty, and Israel. So it's a pretty condensed piece of real estate right here. And I'm sure you've heard a little about it in the news. So we're going to talk about innovation and safety, and we now have a new world order in many ways, having just been through a few years of pandemia. So with that little introduction, and we're now dealing with military issues pretty much throughout the world now, I think I'll be ready to embark. So before I say anything, I just want to thank many people.
Sorry, Nadine. I was just saying, if folks are watching live, they can feel free to comment below in the comments for anyone watching. So I'll turn it over to you.
Great, thanks. So really, before I say anything, I just want to thank many people and a very long list of very hardworking people who have worked towards optimizing system safety and EMS over the years, and that I've had the privilege to work with, in particular the folks from the National Academies of Science, Medicine and Engineering EMS Safety Subcommittee that I co-chaired with Eileen Fraser for more than a decade. So what are we going to cover today? Well, I want to do a little bit about what we know now and what we need to do now, given that we do have a new world order, and what is there for the forward thinkers and the future horizons. So pandemias have been a massive challenge for EMS, and for 2 years the loss of life of EMS providers due to pandemic really surpassed the safety issues relating to transportation. First time that's ever happened. And we now have a situation where military and civilian issues are blurring, where the civilian community is getting caught up in military operations, and EMS is got a role that's no longer the usual civilian military role. We'll talk a little more about that. And we've spoken before about cross-skilling industry and providers, but really now the issue of cross-skilling citizens as well is becoming an important issue. Many smart technologies to help us, and lots of innovation we're going to cover, as well as some novel powered systems on the horizon and in our hands. And sometimes it's just better and safer and cheaper to do what we know now and to use the technologies that have been developed to optimize safety That's low-hanging fruit. We also have some advantages now of a lot of open source information. And the challenges are often the challenges of applying what we know now. So what's safety? Well, safety is a condition where you're basically being protected from undergoing or experiencing harm, injury, or loss. And what's innovation? Well, something that's new, it's original, like a unicorn sometimes, and it's more effective, hopefully. So we can ask GPT what EMS safety innovation is. And as Robbie said before, they'll just tell me about what I've been talking about in these presentations. But I did ask them, and they said safety innovation is an essential aspect of improving emergency response and patient care. And I was extremely pleased to see that word essential. And their top 10 EMS safety innovation realms were these: telemedicine integration, augmented reality and virtual reality, advanced vehicle safety features, body-worn cameras, predictive analytics, innovation in personal protective equipment, drone technology, high-fidelity simulation training, and data integration and interoperability and mental health support programs. And we're going to actually cover most of those and a few other areas that ChatGPT missed. So, safety of the provider, the public, and the patient. And really, safety is a tool to not only save lives, but properly implemented will save time and money also. It's just important that you have safety innovations that are evidence-based and not a solution looking for a problem. You want to be working smarter, not harder. And as we look at the Swiss cheese of risk and losses, it's when everything all lines up in a bad way that risk makes it through to losses. When there's failures at an organisational management level, when there's failures in how we precondition our employees and motivate them, unsafe acts, and when defences fail, that's when you have losses. So smart technologies is the big issue right now. Predictive analytics, AI dispatch as one example, and AI ultrasound also is now being deployed in many places throughout the United States using the butterfly ultrasound device. Voice-activated commands, we don't have to reach and touch everything. We can actually use voice-activated commands. Smartphone technologies we're going to talk about, and some mixed reality technologies. All sorts of new things with vehicles. Our fleet mix is something that is about to take a quantum leap. We already have numerous types of vehicles that are used in many services, from vehicles, vans, trucks, motorcycles, gators, to now drones. We're going to talk about that, manned and unmanned, and all sorts of new vertical takeoff vehicles. Innovation in PPE, definitely in connected health, and some excellent work done in the United States in that realm, and also wireless patient monitoring and health information exchange. So the future has caught up with us. What I spoke about last time is sort of here now. We were talking about the philosophy of space-based solar power. Well, January this year, just a few months ago, NASA put out this update on space-based solar power, and this is now a reality, and this is something that we should be aware of and know is coming down the pike. And we touched on the concept of a million-mile battery when I last spoke, but actually 8 days ago, on April 3rd, the million-mile long-life electric vehicle battery was actually now available. And when we look at some of the other issues about interesting innovation in propulsion, just a few months back, the flying vehicle startup in Australia is working to develop a hydrogen-powered air ambulance. And there's hydrogen-powered ambulances now in the UK and I think Scotland. So EVTOLs, that's another hydrogen-powered EVTOL that's being developed here in Israel. And that's me checking it out. That's not the hydrogen-powered one. That's their standard prototype that's been doing some demo flights. And then we have things like the median ambulance, which would be such an asset. Here in Israel, we have traffic jams everywhere. Israel's a small country with quite impressive population density, and I think it's no surprise that Waze was developed in Israel, if anyone who's had to drive here. And we're going to talk about Waze in a little moment. And also virtual reality that's authorable. And we're going to talk a little more about the changes that have happened really in very recent years in virtual reality training in EMS. And I'm very pleased to tell you that I actually took this photo myself. This is on September the 14th last year. And it's at the Hadassah Medical Center and Kerem in Jerusalem. And this is actually a manned drone, a two-seater drone that's an autonomous vehicle, and it's making a flight from the hospital. So keep your eye on the EVTOL situation that's coming up in August, the next EVTOL summit. This is going to be a very real domain for EMS. I just wanted to touch on some mixed reality. This is just a few months back. A relationship between Sri Lanka EMS and Singapore have created an AI-powered connected ambulance. And it'd be very interesting to hear a little more about how they're doing in the last few months since this has been deployed. So I'll be updating you on that when we next speak. And this is what I mentioned just before, the median ambulance. And this really is where we start to see design and innovation, not just of an ambulance vehicle, but integrating city and road planning and design. And we're going to talk a little more about that sort of regional and more broad-based integration. And issues such as this is one. And we touched on this, the online and virtual reality training system that you can build yourself. So AI, the good, bad, and the ugly. Well, we do fortunately have some great opportunities now to integrate AI and EMS in dispatch. And also here's some examples, some recent examples of emergency dispatchers using AI and cloud-based tools. So, clearly this is an area of great value to EMS, and we're going to be seeing more and more happening in that realm. There are some papers that have shown that AI is good, but our dispatchers are also very good. And I think we're going to see that the standard situation that AI is going to be able to augment the efficiency of our work, but not necessarily take our work away. And ultrasound is now utilising AI extensively, making point-of-care ultrasound a tool that can be used by folks that aren't expert radiologists in ultrasound, which is valuable. And we still have some challenges with AI, and this was a number of issues that came up with the Tesla vehicles not recognising emergency vehicles and crashes occurring. So the other area that we're starting to see great value is the utility of robots in the EMS setting and in a number of our disaster settings and emergency response settings, whether it be a shooting scene or a chemical or a biological scene. And this is just one of the examples of one of the robot dogs being used by the Fire Department of New York. And this is an Israeli example. This is a little robot. It's called the Rooster, and it can fly and walk. And these are now tools that we were going to be seeing available to us. And again, our challenge is how to best harness them and be trained to use them. So be ready to deploy these new and effective tools for both training and operations. So we've got lots of new solutions that we need to integrate into our scope of practice, whether it's in training, operational tools, or in engaging our communities. And I always love this quote. It's my favourite quote in the world, and it comes from Colin Powell, the former Secretary of State for the United States. And he says, being responsible sometimes means pissing people off by procrastinating on the difficult choices, by trying not to get anyone mad, and by treating everyone equally nicely, regardless of their contributions. You'll simply ensure that the only people you'll wind up angering are the most creative and productive people in the organisation. And our colleague Chris Cibarello said these very wise words, that leadership is not about a position, it's about professional development. Leadership is a verb, it's an action, not a position, and everyone will influence someone else, both for the good or the bad. Speaking of good, I just wanted to make a mention of our colleague in EMS, Brooke Lerner, who's spent her short 52 years making a massive contribution to EMS, and sadly she passed away on the 4th of October. I just wanted to make a note of thanks for her work to EMS and personally. So we have a new world order. This is a screenshot from my telephone in mid-October, and I live in Ashdod, which is 30 kilometres from Gaza, and Waze knows that driving home is not a safe destination. So this is a very different world that we live in now, where civilian and military blurs. And here is a little snapshot of, you can see Egypt over here, and Israel is this little thing here. And this little spot here, as I mentioned, Eilat is where I am right now, and it's right by Jordan, Saudi, and Egypt. And I use Waze frequently and often just to get around, particularly if I'm in a new town. But because of this location, every now and then, suddenly my Waze thinks I'm in Cairo. And it's because there's military intervention in GPS to try and protect civilians from rockets. So what would EMS do if all of a sudden they're using Waze and they're in Eilat, but their Waze is telling them they're in Cairo? So there are all sorts of areas now where military strategies and issues are impacting the routine practice of civilian life and EMS. For example, this was what a personal first aid kit sort of looked like for most of us. But now that's me browsing on Amazon to buy tourniquets, because I am now living in an area where you may need to use a tourniquet on yourself or someone who you've stopped to assist. So my car has 4 tourniquets in it at all times, and my civilian car, and many physicians are being encouraged to carry tourniquets like these, and the military are all trained to use that tourniquet, and most people entering the military are age 18 and above. So many civilians are familiar, because all males do military service in Israel. They're familiar with the use of a tourniquet. So EMS safety, well, patient safety, yes, it's important. Occupational safety, biohazard safety, scene safety, vehicle safety, we're going to talk about that, and fleet safety a little more, and system safety, how you deploy and dispatch, but also regional safety, as we've just touched on, actually will impact EMS safety. So we spent some time in the last 2 years learning a lot about how to keep our providers safe in the setting of a pandemic. And there's some excellent documents out there that have even been around for a little while. This is the EMS Agency Safety Program from the National EMS Safety Council, and it really is an excellent document. And I think that every service should have a document such as this and be familiar with it. It addresses, this all hazards approach: physical, biological, physiological, psychological, environmental, and operational hazards, and that we need to be familiar with the state-of-the-art technology that's available now to address or neutralise or minimise these hazards. So designing a safe system. Well, safety in EMS crosses into so many different disciplines: clinical practice, public health, automotive safety, new technologies, and we've talked about a number of them, things like impact biomechanics, ballistics, human factors, how a fleet is managed safely, and as we've talked about, regional safety. But as a leader, how do you create change? And the late Chief Alan Brunicini, an incredible man and a huge contribution to EMS in the United States. And he says, if you want to make changes in a worker's behaviour, change the behaviour of the boss. So how far upstream can we go for minimising risk? Well, the boss, manufacturers, the state. Here in Israel, 95% of the rockets fired at civilian areas are deactivated by a thing called the Iron Dome. And they say you're really an Israeli when you know the difference between the sound of an Iron Dome rocket being taken out and a rocket actually hitting a building or the ground. But if it were not for this technology, EMS and emergency healthcare system would frequently here be rapidly overwhelmed. This is a photograph that was taken in May 2021, and this is the Iron Dome deactivators up there to take out these rockets so that they don't land on civilian areas. So in May 2019, there were 600 rockets in 36 hours. And that's someone lying on the road there, covering their head with their hands by a vehicle, trying to stay out of harm's way. 600 rockets in 36 hours was considered an intense barrage. Then we had the issue I just showed you the photo about. But now on October 7, when the situation became very unstable here in the Middle East, 5,000 rockets were shot from Gaza into civilian targets in 20 minutes. So the challenges of being able to protect civilians and the EMS system under a situation like that is really difficult. So the Iron Dome is part of a large system of these rockets that are fired at missiles to deactivate the missiles. It's a missile defense system. So its goal is to target missiles, and it manages to get about 95% of them. Just this week, we had a bit of a first. I'm sitting here right on the Red Sea, and the Iron Dome system got mounted onto a ship, so it could be moved around in the sea. And we had rockets that were fired on Eilat that got taken out by this ship-mounted system. So that was a first. So when we look at the layers of protection for an EMS system in a civilian utilisation during wartime, there's some interesting issues that come up. I've divided them into three realms: primary prevention, secondary prevention, and tertiary prevention. So primary prevention, I suppose you have peace and you don't have any hate and you don't have terrorism. Unfortunately, we seem to have the second and third. Secondary prevention is that somehow or other you can take out the rocket launchers so that rockets aren't launched and that you can somehow contain terrorists. And that's a military challenge. It's complex. And tertiary prevention is when all of that fails, you have an air raid siren. And we'll talk about it in just a moment. I'd never heard an air raid siren until I came to live in Israel, but I hear them all the time now. And then you have air raid shelters in every home, well, nearly every home, and many playgrounds. And you have tools like the Iron Dome. And so what's the cascade towards civilian EMS being overwhelmed? And there's that blur now between military and civilian. So if primary prevention, items 1, 2, and 3 can't be achieved, then secondary prevention, items 4 and 5 are essential. But if you can't remove the rocket launchers and contain the terrorists, if secondary prevention fails, then the tertiary prevention that I identified, items 6 to 8, are essential. And those were air raid sirens, air raid shelters in homes, and the Iron Dome and David Sling. But if that fails, then civilian EMS can potentially be overwhelmed. So tertiary prevention, the Iron Dome and David Sling can intercept 95% of civilian targeted rockets. But it's expensive and technology intense, and it can be overwhelmed. 5,000 rockets in 20 minutes is probably close to overwhelming it. Air raid sirens, fabulous. Give you warning, 15 seconds to 45 seconds, depending on where you are. I have in Ashdod about 45 seconds. Here in Eilat, it's probably about 30. Bomb shelters and protected safe rooms. Many homes have a protected safe room, and parks have bomb shelters, but not all. The protected safe room is actually good for shrapnel. And on October 9th, my building got hit by shrapnel. And I'll tell you, I was terrified. But it's not as effective as an underground bomb shelter. And also, the elderly or the disabled are very unlikely to reach a safe area in time. And when it comes to military ambulances, there are some special tactical military vehicles being developed here in Israel, also in Australia, that are focused on being active in the military setting. But in civilian cities, it's your local EMS. So how do you frame safety? Well, I'd like to quote Chief Justin Reed, who said, "If there's a failure in a system that you design, then it is leadership's fault. How did you design? How did someone fail in a system you designed?" And that changes how we look at problems when things go wrong in EMS. And it really helps you find a process to build a good solution. With EMS traditionally and historically, design sort of happens upside down. We often do what we know and what we've seen and what's always happened. And there are visionaries, and they do some interdisciplinary issues, and I'm aware of some very interesting work happening actually in the hands of Robbie McHugh that's looking at some innovative ways to optimise system safety in EMS. So the project that Robbie was just describing to me is really right at that interface of disruptive new tech and operational practice at all levels of the EMS system and across disciplines. You know, they say it takes 30 years to adopt. Well, I think we saw very clearly in COVID that we were able to adopt a lot quicker than in 30 years. And, you know, we look back in time, we see that it takes time for initiatives to become mainstream unless there's strong pressure and lights and sirens use. This paper came out in 2022 in a setting of a lot of talk for many years about something like that. And great to see initiatives such as this. So back in the 1980s, we all remember what well, those of us old enough, remember what a cell phone looked like. It was a big, heavy brick. Now it all fits on your watch. So we're pretty smart now. But, but in 1980s, that was an ambulance. And even 2 years ago, that was an ambulance in most places. Here in Israel, we don't see so many of those. They're mainly vans here. And many services now in the United States have a large fleet of vans. But as Rob mentioned right at the start, in the United States, there are actually more safety standards for moving cattle than there are for moving patients. And this is EMS's work and patient care environment. And when things go wrong, outcomes can be tragic. So how do we keep ourselves safe in this vehicle? And really, is this the sort of vehicle we want to be in? So I've been involved in some interdisciplinary testing, working with the engineers to look at what happens when something goes wrong and there's a crash in EMS, and identified a number of dimensions that can be optimised and improve the safety for the patient and the providers. And there are certain things that aren't necessarily an optimisation. And here's a situation where some of these side-facing 4-point harnesses are not effective and may actually be harmful. And that's something that's been published now 25 years ago. So we sure don't want to be doing something that technical science demonstrated was hazardous 25 years ago. And as Newton's always said, the law of physics will prevail. So ambulance design and safety has been an interesting challenge, and it's not new. About 150 years ago, this patent for improvement in ambulances was submitted by G.W. Arnold to create a spring system so that the bumps wouldn't bother the patient or the provider quite so much. But that was with a horse and buggy. And if you were to ask people with a horse and buggy how to optimise the safety of that system, they would say, well, maybe more rest stations, but they're unlikely to say the combustion engine, let alone the hydrogen-powered EVTOL. And to quote David Daniels, he said, it's easier to remember than it is to imagine, and 200% correct. So what's the timeline for EMS safety issues? Well, back in the 60s and 70s, the focus was really rescue the patient and not so much on safety for the provider or the patient. By the 80s and 90s, safety was a concern, but there wasn't a lot of technical science to drive what we should do. But from then and then pretty much in the last 25 years, there's been a lot of safety technical data that's rolled out. And the real challenge that we're faced with now is adoption. How to best adopt and integrate the innovation that is present right now in our hands. How to make sure that we do the right thing at the right place, at the right time, for the right person. And how to achieve that goal for now and in the future so that we integrate rapidly and don't wait 30 years. We want system design constraints that allow us to do the clinical work that is required and essential to not get hurt or killed, to not hurt or kill anyone else. So really, clinical need and human tolerance of injury are strong drivers of how we design our system. So our challenges are making sure that we do what we already know works, adopting new technologies and practices that augment system performance and safety. ChatGPT was right. Embracing decentralisation of healthcare, doing more with less money and less workforce. And cross-skilling not only our EMS providers and industry, but also the community, and I spoke a little about that. And really having a systems thinking and practice approach. So I'm going to talk a little bit about some more innovation. And I love this quote. This is from Joe Borgraf, who's the president of the Furno Group and also a leader in the VR patient organisation. And he says, to create an innovative and model EMS system, we must engage in a collaborative and cross-functional conversation among the many contributing partners in the EMS industry. EMS suppliers should embrace and drive new innovation to improve the process and efficiency of delivering service while advancing the level and the outcome of emergency care. And I think those are really valuable words that are a great guiding light for EMS. And it applies to everything from low tech to high tech. And we're going to talk about both low tech and high tech in just a moment. It's important that there is a system of safety that it's not piecemeal, because everything interacts with everything else. You've got to think of really the overall impact of making any changes and how they interface with other elements. And there are small, low-cost changes in practice that can make a big improvement in system safety. Policies that are focused on augmenting safety, incentives for safety, innovation in design from micro to macro, and preparedness and training, ensuring that safety is integrated at all levels and isn't just a separate thing. So we have a 25-year window of predicting EMS safety innovation now. 23 years on from September 11, almost. That same day, we actually held the world's first military and emergency vehicle safety symposium, September 11th, 2001. And we covered many different aspects of the safety of EMS then. And as you know from what we've talked about already today, there are many things that we didn't talk about that are real issues for us now. But we did say that there was a need for morbidity and mortality surveillance for EMS, that there should be national and international collaboration, and that the current funding base is at rate limiting to progress, and there needs to be a clearly defined pathway for translation of problem identification to resolution and policy implementation, and a need for an appropriate overseeing infrastructure with the development of safety performance standards. And that we should focus on all aspects of the ambulance environment and identify if there are any real dangers that exist in current practices and address those. Safer patient transport practices even exist in 2001 and should be being used. The importance of understanding the right sort of testing that matches the environment and the hazards, and bringing everyone together in an interdisciplinary approach. So 12 years later, 11 years later, we held the Transportation Research Board EMS Safety Summit. And you can go to that link and listen to all those presentations and download the slides. It's active at the National Academies of Science, Medicine and Engineering, gratis. And we covered pretty much what was available then in 2012, but here we are now with another 13 years of development since that time. And we're going to talk a little more about some of the additional elements, but those 8 sessions covered very much the scope of what was going to help make your system safer. So we know about safe systems, crew resource management, transport system safety, risk perception, fleet operations and management. We even have standards for that. Vehicle design safety, lots of work done in that area. Scene safety, how we handle our patients, and health and wellness and hours of service. So this document came down in 2018 and promoting innovation in emergency health services. So what are we going to be doing between 2024 to 2050? Well, the EMS agenda for 2050, a people-centered vision, covers very important elements that should be being focused on by all EMS services. And please take a look at that. So we have new tools, new technologies, new vehicles, new systems, and new industry relationships. And of those many new technologies that we need to harness, some are in the fleet management domain. Others are our different types of vehicles, including not only, just as we mentioned, different types of vans and trucks and motorcycles and even segways, but drones and EVTOLs, manned and unmanned. We have robotic tools now, and AI augmented dispatch and ultrasound, virtual reality, digital health, the cloud and the crowd. These are largely issues that we were not so familiar with back in 2012. But we need to be ready to deploy new and effective tools for both training and operations. And our goals are to do things better, safer, and cheaper. That's a great goal. So understanding risk and communicating risk perception is one of our challenges. When Hurricane Sandy came down to New York, we saw these sort of many different maps, but I'm not a meteorologist, and looking at these maps, it's just a little difficult to understand what was going to happen when to me and what I needed to be prepared for. I like this map that sort of outlines a little bit more clearly what's going on and where. But this was a great map. Alert and action. I knew that if I was in that red area, I was going to have to take action. And I think we need to be thinking about how we communicate risk. It's said that a medic's career lasts only as long as his back does, and that an ambulance crash, aside from 2020 and 2021, when COVID took over, an ambulance crash was the most likely cause of an EMS occupational fatality. And sadly, violence and PTSD are an increasing EMS burden. So a really important principle is that ambulance transport safety is part of a system. The overall balance of risk involves the safety of all the occupants, patients, providers, and the public. You have to have a system of safety of dispatching your vehicle, getting you, your patient, and your equipment to, in, and out of that vehicle, making sure the scene that you're at is safe, ensuring that providing essential patient care inside of that vehicle can be done without jeopardizing you or the patient, and that you want to be able to be safe if something were to go wrong in a crash or a near-miss situation, as well as addressing biological and chemical hazards and personal psychological safety, as well as public safety. So it's a complex system. And as I just outlined, it's a system that's occurring in a number of different places. We want to be working smarter, not harder. So when we look at the Gartner hype cycle, it's a cycle that looks at innovation and expectations, looks at the innovation trigger, the peak of inflated expectations, the trough of disillusionment, the scope of enlightenment, and the plateau of productivity. Well, back in 2022, this is sort of how it looked for health. We had some AI coming out down the pike, and digital humans and decentralized identity. And we were starting to look at some of the issues we've talked about so far. But if we look at it now, we're really seeing a really significant change in how digital health is impacting what we do, even in EMS. So when it comes to our local EMS system, what policies offer you your safer system? How do I incentivize and get my team to address safety issues? And what features are going to enhance safety if you're purchasing a new vehicle? Little questions like, what's the optimal loading height to protect my medic's back? What colour scheme do I want on vehicles and clothing to make it safest? Why don't all stretchers have lights when half the time it's the EMS vehicles out at night time in the dark? And do we need helmets, and if so, which one? And what data should I collect when something goes wrong, and how do I analyse it? So we really need to consider, where is the bang for buck in EMS safety? Where is the low-hanging fruit? We actually know an enormous amount now about how to optimise safety and minimise risk. We just need to imply it. And we spoke about these a little earlier. So when we look at all the different disciplines involved in EMS safety, there are many realms of specialisation that all interact with each other and with the safety of our transportation. And it's a really big challenge to have expertise in all those areas so that it's possible to optimise the system that you have. So some little things that we do know work: safety awareness, cultural change and safety leadership, policies for safe vehicle operations like the Z15, we'll talk about that in just a moment, technical science-based vehicle interior design, how we secure our equipment. Patients should have those over-the-shoulder belts on so they don't slide forwards and cause an injury to themselves or others. Optimising with forward and rear-facing seating, no squad bench. If you happen to have a squad bench, use the lap belt, not the other harness systems that we discussed earlier. And fleet management tools with electronic feedback have been shown to be extremely effective, as well as some other technical electronic devices. So we need to have a roadmap for safety. We need to have a focus, and this is a roadmap used by BHP, which I think is just an excellent model. It shows compliance, systems and plant equipment, and your people, and to make sure that you have a roadmap of what's in place and what's in progress. So it's not just a conceptual model to have a safety roadmap. It's got to have tangible steps. It must be systems focused, have measurable elements, and be temporally adjusted for immediate, short, medium, and long-term goals. And it's always important to be reward and recognition driven. So yes, we want innovation and we want it now. And I mentioned these are the areas where we've got a lot of innovation unfolding, and much of this has happened in the last 10 years. So in 2024, we have disruptive innovation. We have EVTOLs, new propulsion technologies, optimized ground vehicle designs, new tech innovation, AI in multiple domains, expanded scope of practice, and dispatch innovation. And we have plenty of solutions that we can apply right now in training and education, our operational tools, optimizing our transport vehicles, innovation in personal protective equipment, AI support tools and adjuncts, engaging our community, and expanding scope of practice. Simple goals, standards for safety, policy that's driven by science, and databases to demonstrate outcome. We all remember the mask pants situation where the outcome was not an improvement. And really simply, innovation, collaboration, and knowledge transfer will help guide us to getting an optimized outcome. It's really important to keep in mind the all hazards type of injuries: physical, biological, physiological, psychological, environmental, and operational. Physical risks and hazards are ergonomic, relate to crashes and falls and mechanical and violence. I mentioned briefly before, what's the loading height of your ambulances? Well, 27 inches will save your back. Challenging design-related human factors issues exist in our current systems. Equipment that's hard to reach. Interior design that exposes you to unnecessary biological, automotive, and ergonomic hazards. You shouldn't have to be leaning right over the patient's expired air to reach your equipment. Stretchers. Well, independent leg stretchers are very clever and cost effective. And this is an example of one of those independent leg stretchers that can be loaded really easily with just your fingertips. None of this physical heavy work to load the stretcher. And these sorts of stretchers can even do stairs, and they're lightweight. And as I mentioned before, why don't we have lights on all the stretchers? Every stretcher should have a light system on them, and just a strip of LED lights, a battery and a switch will allow you to at least light the stretcher up at night so you have fewer tripping injuries and fewer drop patients. Other simple little things. This is a very simple but innovative tool that allows you to open a zipper with one finger. Simple, cost-effective, totally changes the ergonomics of engaging with your bag of equipment. That's what it looks like. Patient transferring slides, again, simple, cost-effective, will save your back and make it much easier to move your patient from one position to the other, their home bed to your stretcher. And again, small footprint, not heavy. Slide sheets as well will also make it easier to move patients from their bed into your stretcher. There's a number of different floor lift devices to help protect your back. And in the Endemo unit, which is still sitting in the United States, hasn't made it over to Israel yet, but hopefully soon, we had a number of these innovative concepts displayed here, and how to design your interior so you can reach your equipment, reach your patient, and not have to get out of your seat. And here we see Josh sitting here showing how he can manage to reach the patient's airway and do the work that needs to be done. And there's a rollout pack here, not cabinets that could be a hazard for the providers. And again, a configurable environment so you can add or take seats out of there and add in a stretcher if the situation is a multi-casualty setting. So again, voice-activated commands we talked about before. We don't need to have to get out of our chair to do everything. We can utilize voice-activated commands. And this was on display at EMS World and EMS Today. So violence has become an increasing concern in the safety of EMS providers. And we talked a little about the pandemic situation earlier. So there's solutions out there for pandemic settings that we're all familiar with. There's patient barriers, and we're going to talk a little more about those, and the effectiveness of air filtration systems is not well described. So very complex putting on all this gear. I'm sure that most of us are familiar with having to do that. It's expensive and time-consuming and claustrophobic. And no, this is not EMS triage. This is a voting booth in Israel where they take pandemia very seriously. So I want to speak a little about some of the things that we've done to protect ourselves. These devices have materialised in the situation of our pandemias, but I have concerns about the system of that, getting the patient in and out, cleaning it, and what is it that you need to protect yourself and the patient. These devices have some serious challenges when you look at them as part of a system. It may not be easy to get the patient in or out. It may contain aerosol pathogens. It may or may not be tolerable for the patient, difficult for it to clean or be disposable, may not be cost effective or time effective, and really does the whole patient need to be contained? And is this a realistic and practical tool for having air filtration systems in EMS? So maybe something more simple is what we need. This is a compact foldable barrier that will allow you to provide oxygen to the patient, but will prevent the patient from putting their aerosol contaminant in your environment. Again, physiological risks and hazards. Well, exertion is a real challenge. There are now wearables and monitors to help us measure and monitor. And there are also some special adjuncts and tools. Wearable tech for providers and for the patients. There will be a time where our patients will have wearable tech on them and we won't have wires all over the back of the ambulance. And here's an example of some wearable wireless tech. Psychological risks and hazards, stress and sleep deprivation and PTSD. Here we've had, particularly after the terrorist invasion here, where the providers were civilian providers responding to horrific mutilation and brutality, and a lot of concerns now for PTSD. And environmental hazards of thermal chemical radiation. And thermal can be a real problem in an intensely hot or an intensely cold area. Operational issues. Dispatch, we must optimise all approaches to dispatch. We don't want to be exposing our providers to unnecessary risk by dispatching lights and sirens frequently and with no change if there is no change in outcome. We should use existing operational standards such as the Z15 from the American Society of Safety Engineers, and we should be choosing and managing our vehicles and equipment in the optimal manner for our fleet management, and doing all we can to have an open culture of safety and awareness and focus on hazard and safety. We do have some innovations in vehicle design. We're going to talk about those in just a moment. And innovative CAD, as well as ensuring that our resources are where they're going to make a difference, and focusing on proper monitoring and feedback for our fleet performance. And we spoke briefly just before about public alerts and some new and innovative interactive technologies. This, for those of you who aren't familiar with it, is the Z15 Safe Practices for Motor Vehicle Operations by the American Society of Safety Engineers and the American National Standards Institute, and this is the 2017 edition. Every EMS service should have this document. It covers everything that you need to know about managing a fleet of vehicles, and there are a bunch of robotic tools that can optimize your fleet safety management. And when it comes to telematics, how much technology and data and of what type do you need to improve your fleet safety performance? And it may be that you can get 80% of information from 20% of the technology. But one of the important things that AJ Heitman always emphasised when it comes to intersections, you might think they've heard you, and you know they must have seen you, and maybe they did. But there's no way human possibly they could stop. And when you look at perception and reaction times and vehicle braking times, this little graphic is in the dry and also in the wet on the lower line here. And you can see quite clearly this is why intersection crashes are such a problem. Because even if they saw you and even if they heard you, it's not humanly possible for them to stop. And as AJ says, whatever colour, if you run a red light, someone will be killed. And we've done a lot of learning from our international colleagues. This is Retmobile in Fulda, Germany. AJ Heitman and Scott Craven's there, meeting with the designer and founder, Professor Sefrin, of the Retmobile event. And here's just an example of some old, expensive and not versatile technology and the new iPad-based, actually, game-changing technology that's cheaper and better and very versatile, has numerous different channels that you can check in on, and this really only has those three. And here's an example of equipment right by your provider's hands, and no need to be leaning over the patient to provide care to them, and also forward and rear-facing seating. These are vehicles at Retmobile, and this is another example of equipment right by your side. No need to lean over the patient to get to your equipment. You can do it from your belted and seated position. I'm going to mention a little about some Israeli innovation. This is the Magen David Adom, the EMS service for Israel. They actually have an app, and you can interact with dispatch directly with the app. And it even has a video component, so the dispatchers can see video of what's going on. If you're doing CPR, they can actually watch you do that. And there's an example of the dispatch centre, pretty busy place. This is Eli Jaffe's excellent idea. He doesn't do moulage like we know it. For training drills, he does moulage T-shirts, so that when you do a mass casualty drill, you just put on the T-shirt. It's much quicker and much less messy than doing all the complex moulaging. As I said, work smarter, not harder. Fleet mix. Well, that's the sort of fleet mix we sort of know about. In addition to our vehicles, trucks and vans, we have motorcycles, bicycles, gators, and even segways. And motorcycle medics are a huge asset to many fleets, particularly in places where the roadways might not be as easily manageable. And I think that there's now a much greater adoption of motorcycle medics globally. Again, avoid policy and practice that's ignorant of safety data. We know what we can see in the day and in the night. We can't see red easily, and we can't see navy blue at night. So we don't want to be seeing people in navy blue uniforms and red vehicles, because we know that they're hard to see. And we can see these guys really well because they're not in navy blue uniforms. A little word about CAD and the crowd and the cloud. We talked a little bit about Waze earlier. And this is an integrated platform that integrates the EMS process with Waze, and it's the Genesis Pulse, and it's a very innovative approach that is very valuable to EMS. Another issue of community outreach and is crowdsourcing intervention. This is a paper on layperson reversal of opioid overdose supported by smartphone alert, and that's got some ongoing work underway right now in the United States. And clearly we know from our colleague Dr. Craig Holm in Denmark that bystander defibrillation is going to improve our outcomes of our patients. They're less likely to be dead after their cardiac arrest, and they're less likely to be in a nursing home. So encouraging bystander defibrillation. We spoke briefly about mixed reality, AR, VR, and MR. What's interesting is when you start looking at the published literature in this field in EMS, there's been a real flurry of publications in the last really 2 to 3 years of the use of virtual reality and EMS responder training. And please do take a look at some of those papers. It's just a sample there. And this is just from a few weeks ago. Virtual reality training in Texas is mainstream there now. And there's virtual reality training for ACLS available also, and in a number of parts of the world. There's also virtual reality violence training that began some years ago in Australia, and this is them in the classroom learning how to prevent violence in the workplace using virtual reality. And here's another group. They're the Real Responders. They're a group from Australia that do disaster management training, and they have virtual reality model, and they're demonstrating this right there. These are really impressive tools where you can measure and monitor and assess performance without putting people in harm's way. And then next level VR is VR scenario training that's authorable by you. So that's do-it-yourself VR training evaluation tools. It's virtual reality that you can build for yourself. And these are some of the demonstrations. There are now thousands of different case scenarios and hundreds of trainers now building those. So it's not so difficult. I managed to build this virtual reality training scenario. So it's also a design tool that you can use to help plan your ambulance, your new ambulance. Build it in virtual reality so you know how it feels before you actually spend the money on building it yourself. I want to talk a little bit about some of the propulsion systems in EMS and innovation. You know, we started off with horse and buggy, went to gasoline, then diesel, then electric, and now we're looking at hydrogen and other, as I mentioned, solar power batteries. New ambulance vehicles are being developed on electric platforms. This has been going on now for a few years. It's cleaner, it has a lower loading height, and it's cost saving. This is a mini electric ambulance here in Israel in 2017. And 2021, the electric ambulance development in Canada began. And it's one of the first all-purpose electric vehicles built for an ambulance, designed by paramedics, for paramedics. I think we want to go back to that statement I made earlier, how important it is to collaborate so that you don't make the same mistakes that have been made before. Electric vehicles in the Sprinter ambulance, and this is in America, one of the first all-electric ambulances deployed in March 2022. And this is an electric motorcycle vehicle using gyrotech. It's another electric platform, the Re-platform. It's an Israeli-based organisation, and we're going to see more and more electric vehicles as time goes forwards. Hydrogen power. Well, yes, we do have a hydrogen-powered ambulance, hydrogen electric. And is it the system of choice? I don't know yet. Sorry. Oh, sorry about that. So, autonomous vehicles and drones. So these guys were thought leaders back in 2002, putting together this manned drone with a role to provide EMS services. It's now in not only just development phase, but they have some prototypes that are now flying. And this is me having a look at one of those prototypes. As you can see, it's during COVID. I'm wearing a mask. They have now a hydrogen-powered prototype that they're working on. So what are the ideal applications in EMS? When, where, for what, which medical conditions? How do you calculate the cost and risk benefit? A few other interesting little innovations. There's this thing, you put it on your hands, and I don't know, just over 1,000 horsepower, 5 mini jet engines, and it can actually, just like the Jetsons, sort of fly you. And we mentioned before this median ambulance, and I think creative ideas like this are really fabulous, and they really do require that there's an integration between the civic and the city planning and roads and the actual ambulance design. And this was designed by our colleagues Hong Suan, Lee Hangentek, and Lee Tangen-jung and Song Yu-jin in South Korea. I apologise if I didn't make the pronunciation correct. Unmanned ambulance drones are out there delivering all sorts of things, including AEDs. And manned drones, these are conceptual ideas. And this is the EHang passenger drone from China. And here it was, as I said, that's the EHang flying at Jerusalem at the Hadassah Medical Center. So what's the ambulance of the future? Median, electric, hydrogen, eVTOL? I think all of the above. So to wrap up, ambulance transport safety, as I said, is part of a system. The overall balance of risk involves the safety of all the occupants, the patient and the provider and the public. Our challenges today are adopting new technologies and practices that augment our EMS performance and safety. We are going to see more and more hospitals without walls and decentralisation of healthcare. And the role of EMS is already expanding and very much engaged in outreach into the community more than ever before. We need to do more with less money and less workforce. We need to be cross-skilling EMS industry and the community. And we need to be systems thinkers and practicing in a systems way. Because things can go wrong, but when you have a sound safety policy and technologies in place, and the system is well prepared, you can minimise harm. And I did happen to be in New York that day. It was a pretty interesting day when that occurred. So we need to have an all hazards approach. We must collaborate with different technical disciplines. We can't afford to play the silo game when it comes to the safety of EMS because it will cost us lives, time and money. We must have a meaningful and evidence-based approach to how we design and run our operations and policy. And we must be truly outcomes driven. So, in conclusion, the future is now. It's here with us. We must have an all hazards approach. And safety can't just be some extra thing. It must be inherent to operational process, design and practice. There are real challenges for adopting new disruptive technologies and applied innovation. And we need to work hard to making sure we learn how to optimize that integration. And cross-skilling of EMS with industry, EMS providers and the community is now very important. And that interplay between our patient, our provider and the public safety from a systems perspective is key to effective and safe operational EMS performance. So thank you very much. I will be uploading your electronic handout and all the text slides at the objectivesafety.net website. So just give me a day or so to get that done. And any questions?
Well, Dr. Nadine Levick, we appreciate you always being on the cutting edge of technology, of safety. Your passion certainly shines through. And for that, we really thank you for being a champion in our industry. Your comments about breaking down the silos, that has been a through line throughout discussions this week and having people check their egos at the door, trying to break down the silos, understand that we don't have all the answers. We don't have to know all the answers. And to your point, looking to the science and the research and the outcomes data is going to be critical, and not just doing the same of what we've been doing in the past. So thank you again for coming back every year, for being here for the 5th EMS Leadership Summit. And we appreciate that.